Deep in the basement of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, in a climate-controlled storage room cataloged as Archive Sublevel D, there is a shelf that most visiting scholars never reach. The items on that shelf are not on display. They are not in any guidebook. They are not referenced in the public registry of significant finds. On that shelf, wrapped in aged linen and secured inside a stamped wooden crate, sits a limestone disc. It measures 81 centimeters across and roughly 12 centimeters thick. It weighs 43 kilograms. It has 2 concentric rings carved into its face, each one capable of rotating independently around a central aperture. Each ring is inscribed with a dense, non-standard register of hieroglyphs. At first glance, it looks ceremonial, decorative, something a priest might have carried in a procession, something scholars call symbolic, and file away without a second thought. Most people walk right past it, but hidden inside it is something that shouldn't exist. When you align the outer ring to the inner ring at a specific rotational position, a position that can only be found by following a progression of glyphs that appears nowhere else in the entire corpus of Egyptian writing, something materializes inside the central aperture of the disc. And according to the researcher who first decoded it in 1977, what appears there is not a prayer. It is not a spell. It is not an invocation to any god of the Egyptian pantheon. What appears when those 2 rings lock into alignment is a precise geometric encoding of a subterranean location, a set of spatial references, directions, distances, depth measurements, a map of something buried far underground. And the location it points to has never been fully excavated. Not a myth, not a metaphor. And if the decoding is correct, it means there is a chamber beneath the Egyptian desert that has been sitting unopened for over 3,000 years, waiting. This is the story of Catalog Item EA-1964-Osi-44. And if you want to follow this investigation, wherever it leads, including the discoveries they tried to stop, subscribe right now. This channel goes where the academic papers won't. The disc was recovered in 1964 during a subsidiary excavation conducted by the Egypt Exploration Society at the Abydos complex, approximately 90 meters southwest of the subterranean structure known as the Osireion. The Osireion itself is one of the most anomalous structures in Egypt. A massive granite hall built below the water table, with construction techniques so dramatically different from the Temple of Seti I, directly above it, that serious scholars have questioned whether the 2 buildings were constructed in the same millennium. The Temple of Seti I dates to approximately 1279 BCE. The Osireion, according to geological and stylistic analyses published in peer-reviewed journals, appears by some measures to predate it by thousands of years. The disc was found in a collapsed antechamber, roughly 4 meters beneath the current ground surface. The chamber had been sealed deliberately with mortared limestone blocks. There was no inscribed dedication, no offering jars, no funerary goods, just the disc, sitting inside a rectangular sandstone recess carved specifically to hold it. The discovery was logged by expedition leader Dr. Harold Fenton under the notation ceremonial votive object, possible New Kingdom origin. It was transported to Cairo, cataloged, and effectively forgotten for 13 years. In 1977, an independent epigrapher named Nadia Saleh, working on an unrelated project cataloging non-standard hieroglyphic variants found across Upper Egypt, pulled the disc from storage after noticing its catalog reference buried in a footnote of Fenton's original field report. What she found when she examined it closely changed what she thought she knew about ancient Egyptian inscription methods. Here's where it gets strange. The glyphs on the outer ring are not written left to right. They are not written right to left. They spiral inward at a 17-degree offset, and they can only be read in sequence by rotating the outer ring 1 position at a time. The inner ring responds to that movement with a corresponding glyph that locks into place at the central aperture. The combination produces paired sequences, pairs that don't appear in any standard hieroglyphic dictionary. Saleh spent 4 months building a full transliteration table before she understood what those pairs were encoding. They were not phonetic, they were not ideographic in any conventional sense, they were directional, azimuthal, angular. And when she cross-referenced the angular sequences with solar declination tables for the latitude of Abydos, she found that each paired sequence corresponded to a compass bearing. Each compass bearing had an associated depth notation. The sequences were instructions, a set of stepped bearings for navigating underground. For decades, scholars dismissed it as symbolic. Then modern science found something that changed everything. Let's begin with the first clue encoded in the disk. The outermost sequence, which Saleh labeled Register 1, begins with the glyph for the mouth of the horizon god opens below the field of grain. Mainstream Egyptology reads this as a standard Osireion resurrection formula. The mouth of the horizon opens is interpreted as sunrise. Below the field of grain is interpreted as the underworld, through which the deceased god travels. This reading is reasonable. It is defensible. It appears in nearly every published commentary on comparable funerary texts from the New Kingdom period. But that explanation has a problem. The phrase below the field of grain is modified in Register 1 by 2 additional glyphs that do not appear in any comparable funerary formula. The first is the reed mat glyph, which carries a flat surface or horizontal plane, meaning in administrative Egyptian. The second is a small 3-stroke symbol used exclusively in ancient Egyptian measurement and surveying contexts, what Egyptologists call the calibration mark. When you read the full phrase as it actually appears, the mouth of the horizon god opens below the field of grain upon the horizontal plane measured. The funerary reading collapses entirely because funerary texts do not include calibration markers. Prayers do not require measurement notation. Instructions do. The second clue sits in Register 2, and it becomes stranger. The sequence reads, in Saleh's translation, where the water stands still beneath the redstone, count 47 body lengths toward the place of the invisible flame, then descend. The mainstream reading would parse this as a metaphorical journey to the underworld. The redstone is Osiris's blood. The invisible flame is the transforming fire of resurrection. Standard interpretation. Perfectly publishable, except the Abydos Geological Survey conducted in 2009 by Dr. Mohammed Al-Rashidi of Cairo University, using ground-penetrating radar as part of a broader site mapping initiative, identified an anomaly at 47 meters from the southwestern edge of the Osireion. A cavity, approximately 6 meters wide, 4 meters tall, and 11 meters below the current ground surface. The surrounding stratigraphy showed the presence of ancient water saturation lines consistent with a former underground water table. Red quartzite deposits in that zone are documented in the site's geological records. The water that once stood still, the red stone, and 47 body lengths, calculated using the ancient Egyptian royal cubit of 52 centimeters, cross-referenced with the average stride measurement recorded in Abydos administrative texts, converts to precisely 46.9 meters. Not similar, not inspired by it, the same. The third clue is the most disquieting of all. In the innermost register of the disk, when the rings are brought to their full alignment at the position Saleh spent months identifying, a final glyph sequence appears in the central aperture. It reads, in its most direct translation, the record of the one who built before the flood, sealed by his own hand, opened only by the turning of the sky. The one who built before the flood. This was immediately flagged by Saleh as mythological content. The primordial inundation narrative is not unique to Mesopotamia. Egyptian texts reference a great deluge, a catastrophic inundation that ended a previous age. The time before, but She noted one detail that felt technical rather than theological: sealed by his own hand. In Egyptian administrative language, sealed by his own hand refers to a specific physical locking mechanism, a personal cartouche seal applied to an actual, tangible chamber. That phrase does not appear in poetry. It appears in property records, and opened only by the turning of the sky, in astronomical contexts, preserved across multiple Egyptian temple ceiling inscriptions. The turning of the sky refers to a precession event, the slow movement of star positions over vast cycles of time, what we now call the precession of the equinoxes. The complete cycle spans approximately 25,000 years, but measurable alignment events occur at calculable intervals across that arc, intervals that ancient astronomical observers could have tracked. Intervals that, according to some researchers, appear encoded in the geometry of the Abydos site itself. They weren't guessing, they were recording. Now, does this prove the most extreme version of the story? Probably not. There are archaeologists who would look at the 2009 GPR anomaly and note that natural cavitation in limestone produces underground voids all the time, without any human involvement. They would argue that Saleh's qubit conversion is approximate rather than exact, with a margin that could explain any apparent match. They would point out that her transliteration of the non-standard glyph sequences has never been submitted to a full independent panel for verification, that the directional interpretation of the paired registers remains her reading and hers alone. And they would be right to raise every one of those objections. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary scrutiny. The correct scientific posture is skepticism. Hold it, but here is what the skeptical explanation still cannot account for. The cavity identified by the 2009 radar survey is real. It has been confirmed by 2 independent geophysical assessments using different instrumentation at different frequencies. It sits within 1 meter of the coordinates the disk's directional encoding points to, and the chamber has never been opened. The follow-up excavation proposed by al-Rashidi in 2010 was formally approved by the Supreme Council of Antiquities and allocated preliminary funding. Then, with no published explanation, it was quietly withdrawn from the ministry's project schedule for the following year, and the year after that. Al-Rashidi published no further work on the Abydos site after 2011. His 2009 survey appears in one journal footnote and nowhere else in the archaeological literature. The soil core samples he extracted from around the anomaly, cores that would have confirmed or denied the presence of ancient worked stone at depth, were never cataloged in the final survey archive. They are simply not there. Not dismissed, not disproven, just absent. It was sealed, it was mapped, and then it disappeared. Here is what it would mean if the disk decoding is accurate. If there is a pre-dynastic chamber beneath the Abydos site, sealed deliberately, connected to a construction tradition that predates the oldest confirmed Egyptian architectural record, and described in a document sophisticated enough to encode geographic bearings using astronomical calibration, then we are not looking at mythology. We are looking at evidence that the people who laid the foundations of Egyptian civilization were themselves inheritors of something older, something that was already ancient when Seti I commissioned his temple 3,000 years ago. Something that left behind records precise enough to be decoded by a researcher who stumbled across them in a footnote, who wasn't even looking. 3 millennia later. And if that's true, it means our history is missing a chapter, not a short one. What was in that chamber? Who sealed it? And why? And why, across 3,000 years between its sealing and its discovery, did no one break it open? When the disk that described its location was sitting in an antechamber just 90 meters away, left like a key that someone fully expected would eventually be picked up. These questions do not have official answers. There is no published excavation report. There is no peer-reviewed refutation of Saleh's transliteration. because no one has published a serious attempt to refute it. There is only silence, the particular, careful silence that sometimes surrounds a discovery that doesn't fit. The disk is still in archive sublevel D. The cavity is still in the ground beneath the Abydos plain. Al-Rashidi has not spoken publicly about his 2009 survey in 15 years. And somewhere below the desert, 47 meters from the edge of the most architecturally anomalous structure in Egypt, there is a 6-meter wide sealed void that no one has officially explained and no one has officially opened. It is still there, still sealed, still waiting for the turning of the sky. If this investigation changed the way you think about what ancient Egypt really was, hit that like button and subscribe. Every video on this channel follows the evidence into the places official archaeology refuses to go. And while you're here, the video on the Osirion's granite anomaly is the one you need to watch next, because what the water chamber beneath Abydos actually contains changes everything you just heard.